Hello again and welcome back. If this happens to be your first time listening, thank you so much for stopping by. You are listening to Choose to Endure, the show dedicated to the back of the pack runners, where we share stories, interviews, gear, and sometimes training tips specific to the tail-end heroes of the Ultra universe. My name is Richard Gleave. I've been running Ultras now since 2017. I have taken on and finished numerous distances all the way up through 220 miles, and I am most definitely a member of the back of the pack, just like a lot of you out there might be. So today's topic is an interesting one for me, and it's a challenge that many of us Flatlanders face, and one I'm certainly going to be facing here shortly as I ramp up my training for Cocodona in May, and that is figuring out how to train for a mountain race or a race with a lot of vert when you live somewhere that is absolutely pancake flat, like I do. Whether you're eyeing a 100-miler with some massive elevation, or you're just trying to improve your climbing game generally speaking, you don't necessarily need mountains to train for mountain races. Trust me, I've been there. I've prepped for races with thousands of feet of vert while actually running loops around my local park, which might have maybe a 10-foot incline on a good day. But here's the thing, with some creativity, some consistency, and a little bit of grit, you can get mountain ready no matter where you live. So in this episode, I'm going to break down my favorite tips and strategies to help you build strength, improve endurance, and tackle those climbs with confidence. So grab your running shoes, settle in, let's get started.
Discover raw, inspiring stories from runners who've been right where you are. This is the Choose to Endure Ultra Running Podcast with your host.
He's English, not Australian.
Richard Gleave.
All right. Suggestion 1 here is going to be the most obvious one, right? Embrace the treadmill as your elevator simulator. So I'm going to call these tread hills, I guess. We should definitely think of the treadmill as a vertical training master. Most of the treadmills that you're going to find in any kind of gym can incline anywhere up to 15%, really, and that is really gold for us. You don't need to run on the treadmill at that incline. You're going to do power hiking because, well, let's face it, that's what you're going to do most likely on race day. So for me, what I would suggest, set the incline up to the 15%. You can start lower with 5%, 10% if you're just getting going, but work your way up to a 15% incline. Slow the pace down to 2.5, 3 miles per hour. You can build that up too as you get better. And then go hike for like 20 to 30 minutes at a time. It's pretty boring, yeah. But it does replicate the grind of a long climb. And doing this on a consistent basis can have a huge aerobic upside. And it really doesn't take many sessions to see the benefits either, which I think is wonderful. This is something you can slide into your training the closer you get to your race with a lot of vert. You don't have to do much of it up front, but as you get closer to that race, you want to be more specific, and so you can start sliding in these tread hills. If you want to really take it up a notch, put on your race pack so that you can mimic the weight and the movement of the pack that you're going to carry on race day. I once did a race, I think it was about 15,000 feet of vert. And for those that don't know, I live here in Houston. It is really flat here. There are not many hills. I spent a long time practicing hiking on my treadmill at home, actually, back when I had one at home. I'd throw on a movie, chuck on an ultra running podcast, whatever I needed to do to pass the time. And when I actually did that race, I felt pretty ready, actually, given where I live, to tackle those long and especially the steep ascents. my legs didn't feel quite as trashed as I had expected, and I was pretty pleased with that. So it is possible. Okay, so if you don't have a treadmill, maybe you don't have mountains, suggestion number 2 is going to be to get creative with the local terrain that you do have. You've got to work with what you've got. So look out for parking garages, bridges, even big staircases or your own staircase at your house if you have one. Again, here in Houston, I am a longtime friend with a variety of overpasses and pedestrian bridges. They're short, but they can be quite steep, and I'll try to run repeats on them until I've climbed the equivalent of a small hill, which, granted, is not particularly glamorous, but it definitely can work. Another tip that I have for you is to look for any kind of trail that you can find near your house that has uneven terrain. We have a park pretty close to where I live, and it has a bunch of jeep trails with uneven rock. Those trails are great because even without vert, trails like that are really uneven force your stabilizer muscles to work harder, and that is going to help prepare you for the uneven footing of mountain trails when you get there. I'll tell you too, there's a pedestrian overpass near my house that I once ran for 2 hours straight. So when you can't replicate the terrain, you can focus on strengthening the muscles that you'll use on climbing, and don't forget descending too. Oftentimes the descending people miss, and you'll know about that one really quickly when your quads start yelling at you coming down hills, and that can oftentimes be more challenging than going uphill. So for climbs, focus on your glutes, hamstrings, and your calves. I might suggest exercises like step-ups, definitely lunges, weighted lunges, calf raises. Those kind of exercises are going to be your best friends. And then for those descents that I was just talking about, make sure you work on strengthening those quads with eccentric exercises like step downs or slow squats or even those jump burpees. I've also found that weighted stair workouts are really cool for mimicking the strain of a particularly steep climb as well. Grab a weighted vest if you got one, grab a race pack. I've even grabbed 2-gallon jugs of milk, held one in each hand, find a staircase, maybe in a parking garage, even in your house, climb up and down that staircase for 20 to 30 minutes. I tell you, it can make a lot of difference with not many sessions of doing that. Is really helpful, especially if you don't have much else going on that you can actually get to. I did a lot of step down exercises leading up to a race with some pretty gnarly technical descents over in the Lake District in England. This is the same race that had, according to my watch, approximately 9,500 feet of vert in the first 33 miles, which is pretty insane. And while my quads were definitely still screaming at me during the race, they didn't completely give out, although admittedly I did slip on wet rocks on one descent. I fell and fractured my humerus, which was definitely not funny. Nonetheless, the prep for going up and coming down, that was definitely a game changer. And the last thing I will say here is something you might not hear too much about, but when you're doing those long climbs, and I've done a few of them, you really need to look at your mental game as well for that one. Training for mountain races, a lot of vert in a flat area, it's not just a physical challenge. It's definitely a mental one too. On race day, you're going to face those long climbs, and they are going to seem really endless, especially because you're going slower and you can be pretty out of breath. You've got to make sure that you prepare for that grind mentally as well. So one thing I do during training, if I know I'm going to have a lot of these big climbs, and I know I'm going to have them at Cocodona, is intentionally simulate really long, really boring efforts. For instance, if I can find a treadmill, I'll go hike on it for an hour straight, zero music, zero distractions, looking straight forward. I'll try to make it as boring as I can. It's not fun. I mean, it really isn't fun, but it definitely trains your mind to stay present, focus, look internally, and find ways to push through the monotony of those climbs. I also practice visualization. So before a race, I try to picture myself tackling those really steep climbs and remind myself that I've trained for this and I've done these kinds of climbs before. I know what's going to happen. I know what it's going to feel like, and I know what the terrain is going to be like for the most part. So when you've mentally rehearsed those tough moments, I feel like you're better equipped to handle them in the race. I had a 3-mile climb one time that seemed absolutely never ending, almost straight up. I had to keep reminding myself, you've done harder things than this, one step at a time, keep moving, and eventually you get to the top of those things. All right, so to wrap us back up, here are the key takeaways. Number 1, use your treadmill, if you can get to one, as a tool for incline training. Power hiking is most definitely a secret weapon, and that goes for flat running as well. I'm all for adding some power hiking on an incline into your general maintenance routine. Then number 2, get creative with local terrain that you do have. Get out there, find some bridges, find some parking garages, find some uneven trails, find whatever you can. We've even gone up and down embankments on the side of drainage ditches. Just keep going up and down those. Wherever you can find a hill, get out there, do multiple up and downs of it. It's going to train your muscles. It can also help with the mental side of things too. Number 3, focus on strength training specifically if you know you're going to be climbing and descending. Strong muscles are going to carry you through, but don't sleep on the defense. Make sure you get some quad exercises in there as well. And then number 4, make sure you train your mind for the grind. Mental toughness is just as important as physical fitness. And if you can't get any uphill hiking, physical fitness is a pill that will cover a multitude of illnesses. The better physically trained you are, the more capable you are of withstanding that uphill battle. So when all else fails, focus on fitness. Fitness will take you a long way by itself, even if you have minimal training actually going up the hills. So if these strategies resonate with you and you're ready to take your next uphill step, let's keep the conversation going. Do you have a favorite strategy when training for races with a lot of vert that maybe we haven't touched on here and you think others might benefit from? If so, definitely feel free to join the conversation, share those in the comments, or make a note on the social media pages. While you're browsing the internet, don't forget to subscribe to the show. That way you get notified each time a new episode drops. And if you haven't had a moment to do so, please consider hitting follow, rate the show, and if you're getting something of value, leave a review and let others know. That would mean the world to me. Your support helps grow the podcast, helps connect more runners to this amazing community, and spreads the word to those who could benefit from what we share here. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Choose to Endure, or visit anytime at choosetoendure.com. I would love to hear from you, whether it's to say hello, suggest a topic, or share your story. You can also email me directly if you want at info@choosetoendure.com. Interacting with listeners just like yourself is one of my favorite parts of doing the show. I would love to hear from you. Until next time, make sure you run long, run strong, do some uphill power hiking, and keep choosing to endure.